We have Simon Billenness, a human rights activist from Washington, D.C. Simon, thank you for your time at Indus News. There are reports that security forces are using violent methods to curb the protests against the coup. Don't you think using force will fan more resentment?
I mean, certainly, if the military uses force on these peaceful, pro-democracy protests, I think that is likely just to make the resentment and the cause grow. I mean, we're at a very pivotal point right now, and you know what we're doing at the International Campaign for the Rohingya, and also No Business with Genocide, is that we're doing everything we possibly can to support civil society inside Burma and to particularly support the young people who are on the streets right now calling for an end to military rule. And the call has come up to boycott and sanction the Myanmar military for this coup. The call has come up to go after Myanmar military-owned companies. And we're doing everything we can to get the global business community to boycott and end all business relationships with Myanmar military-owned companies. And we're also lobbying our governments to place sanctions on the Myanmar military officials and, again, on Myanmar military-owned companies.
Simon, after the U.S. sanctions, now the UN human rights body has also called for the curbs on the military rulers. How effective do you think it could be for the restoration of democracy over there in Myanmar?
These sanctions can be very effective. History has proved that when the Myanmar military is under sanctions, their behavior improves. And when the Myanmar military is not under sanctions, that's when they believe they can act with impunity, and that's when they commit the worst human rights abuses. And so, you know, we saw that in August 2017. After the US dropped all sanctions on the Myanmar military at the end of 2016, then the Myanmar military felt completely free to launch that campaign of genocide against the Rohingya. And so, you know, history has proved that sanctions work with the Myanmar military. They understand political pressure and they understand economic pressure, and that's the pressure that the international community needs to exert right now to stop, if we can, the military from using force against the youth on the streets in Myanmar right now.
So, Simon, you have alluded to a very important fact that whenever there are no sanctions, Myanmar's military acts with impunity. So hasn't the military rulers over there learnt lessons from the past?
We need to ensure that this military coup is met with an appropriate response, and that is sanctions on the Myanmar military for having conducted this military coup. The United States government has called this a coup. The United States government has sanctioned top military leaders and a number of Myanmar military-owned companies. That's a very good first step. We need other countries to follow suit. We also need the US government, whether it be the administration or Congress, to ramp up these sanctions, and in particular, sanction Myanmar military-owned conglomerates, MEHL and MEC. You know, the Myanmar military has to understand that any violence by them on the Myanmar people protesting peacefully in the streets, any act of violence will be met with a response by the international community that will sanction them, sanction their business interests, sanction their families, and put, you know, enough political and economic force that we get the military to back off.
Okay, Simon, people from all walks of life are joining the protests, including doctors and police as well. So is there any possibility that personnel from within the military ranks could rise against the coup also?
I mean, I think we're seeing is that members of the police and members of the army who are from the same communities as the protesters are much less likely to obey orders to shoot and kill their own neighbors. What we've seen in the past is when the Burmese military wants to crack down on protests in Rangoon and in Mandalay, they bring in troops from outside of those communities who don't have those community ties. And we're very worried. We're looking for any possible deployment of troops from Rakhine State or Kachin State or Karen State into the capital, Naypyidaw, and into major cities like Mandalay and Rangoon. If we see that, that could be that could presage a violent crackdown by the military. So we've got to look out for that. But, I do expect to see defections from the military, from the police, and just, general civil disobedience from soldiers. In the past, demonstrators have urged soldiers that if they're told to fire, that they just simply cock their rifle up and fire over the people's heads instead. Things like that. And so, it's a very, very tense situation. We are at the risk of serious violence by the military against the Myanmar people protesting on the streets. And, this is why the international community needs to act now to make it very clear to the Myanmar military that this far and no further.
Simon Billenness, a human rights activist from Washington, D.C. Thank you very much for your time at Indus News.